Hey folks, Ryan here from ORS Cross Country Skis Direct. The backcountry category is a big, broad category. There's a wide spectrum of gear to cover the wide spectrum of terrain that you're going to find really beyond the packed, or I should say groomed trail. Backcountry means a lot of things. It's really anything we consider backcountry, anything that isn't on a groomed surface. So that could be, relatively flat, rolling terrain, such as the stuff you'll find on, fire roads, snowmobile trails, multi-use trails. The snow might be packed from other people who've skied or snowshoed ahead of you, but it's certainly not groomed. Throughout the day, you're going to cover some ground. You're going to be in, maybe some hills are going to come your way, but you're generally kicking and gliding along. That's the touring end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got what we consider really your sort of turn-oriented or downhill type backcountry. Most of your day you're going to spend making turns. So we're going to walk you through the whole spectrum briefly and help you decide what aspect of backcountry is best suited for you. There isn't any particular package that's going to cover it all, just like there's no golf club that can putt and drive as well. You need to really pick a package that's going to work for the terrain you're in most of the time. So we have the skis here kind of separated into three categories, and we'll start out with the touring end. I'll start off with the Madshus Eon. This is really I would say the premium backcountry touring ski. So you'll notice it's pretty narrow. Also, backcountry touring skis still have quite a bit of camber, a lot like a classic cross-country ski, so they're going to glide, they're going to be efficient when you're kicking and gliding, trying to cover some ground. They're relatively straight, they're going to track in a straight line really well. They're just not going to make one beautiful S-turn after another. I mean, they could, but it's not what it's designed for. It's designed for going in relatively a straight line. So the Madshus Eon is really the start of the spectrum. I threw this ski by Alpina, this is called a Lite-Terrain in here, mainly because, this is really for sort of touring, but this is more of a kick-around ski. It's more affordable. It's not a very elegant ski. It's pretty heavy, but, it has good grip. It'll glide pretty well. It's a good sort of just entry-level ski for snowmobile trails and that sort of thing. But if you want a more performance-oriented ski, certainly the Eon is where it's at. And then the Epoch, which is one step up in the Eon, the Madshus line, is wider, and it's going to be a little bit softer. So now we're moving, the wider you get, the more off-packed snow you're thinking. But this is still relatively narrow, so we're going to keep it in the sort of backcountry touring, but more for deeper snow. So you're breaking trail maybe, maybe you are looking for a few turns here and there, but you're still generally touring. Same story for the S-Bound 98 by Fischer. Really kind of an all-around ski, but more on the touring end of the spectrum. Real briefly, a couple of features with Fischer. They place their waxless pattern, they sort of inlay it. So the glide section of the base of the ski is a sintered base material, high quality, so you can still put a hot wax on if you want the most glide you're going to get. You don't need to though. And also they actually, because it's inlaid, they can put the pattern along the ski so that it optimizes grip and glide. So that's a nice feature with the Fischer design. And also Fischer incorporates a little bit of rocker in their tips. And I'll talk about rocker in a minute. But basically when the skis are flattened, the tips splay apart a little bit to help it come out of deeper snow, and it helps with turn initiation as well. The Madshus skis are just the classic, these are all-around excellent skis, lightweight, and they have a nice soft flex in the shovel. Compared to the other models, brands, Fischer, Rossignol, Madshus has a nice soft flex in the shovel. It's going to come on a soft snow without necessarily needing that rocker. All right, so there's your sort of four skis in the sort of the touring end of the spectrum. Now we move toward the middle. Now we're trying to do more downhill, more deep snow, but still clinging on to a little bit of touring efficiency. Again, I threw an Alpina model in here. This is a cross terrain. Again, more of a kick-around bushwhacker type ski. Good price, nothing too fancy. Relatively heavy, as I mentioned, so not a great touring ski. Just a kick-around ski for having a good time. But now let's talk about the three that I consider the premium in this category. We've got the Madshus Annum, the Rossignol BC 110, and the Fischer S-Bound 112. So you're getting wider. They're also going to be softer. So the Annum is Madshus's widest ski. If you look, it's got a pretty soft flex, so now the camber is more toward the camber of like a downhill ski, more of a single camber, meant to flatten when you stand on it and be nice and soft for making those nice turns. Really, really great all-around ski, more toward the deeper end of the spectrum, deeper snow, and making some turns with a little bit of touring thrown in. Same idea with the Rossi BC 110, and the same idea with the Fischer S-Bound 112. You know, why do you choose one over the other? They're all excellent skis. Don't beat yourself up too much. Again, these Alpinas are kind of in their own category. If you've moved out of that and you're focusing on these three models, I mean, you know, you're going to like either of these skis. They're all good. Again, Madshus softer in the shovel. The Fischer has that incorporated rocker tip and the inlaid scales going for it to sort of, you know, separate it from the others. And Rossignol, you know, just a great ski company. This is just a really nice, plenty of grip on the bottom of that. It's hard to see, but good all-around ski for your all-around type backcountry. And then we get into the skis that are designed for looking for turns. Okay, your primary focus of the day is to find some turns. And so these skis are fat, they're soft, they're not going to glide very well on a packed snow surface at all, but that's not the point. You're out there to have some turns and to play in some deep snow. BC 125 from Rossignol, this year they really softened it up. So when you squeeze those together, they flatten pretty easily. Nice, fat, soft ski for making some good turns, pushing through some deep snow. That's the Rossignol BC 125. And then we've got two models from Voile. These are really premium, deep powder skis, the Vector BC and the Charger BC. And these have a ton of rocker. So I had mentioned rocker. Let's take a look at what rocker really looks like. When you squeeze these skis together, you'll see how the tips splay apart and the edges don't even contact until about here. What that does is when you're in deep soft snow, that tip just wants to come out of the snow, wants to help initiate the turn and float. These are really lightweight. They're great for kicking around, doing laps. Laps, when I say laps, what I mean by that is you're taking advantage of the fact that these have waxless patterns built into the base, so you don't need to put on the skins. Now, if you're doing an uphill slog to the top of a mountain that's going to take 45 minutes, hour, 2 hours, you're going to want to put climbing skins on. But if you're looking for a little hill where there's some fresh powder, you're going to make 10, 15, 20 turns and then go right back up. That's called lapping. You don't want to mess around with with skins, so you use your scales. Now, you're going to have to herringbone, possibly do a little traversing to get to the top, but ideally you'll get to the top with the scales and then you can just point them down and start making some turns and go do it over again. So the Vector BC is certainly a deep powder ski, but this Charger, this is a big fat, this is a telly ski with scales on the bottom. This is for, you know, your really deep snow, big mountain type stuff, big turns. You don't want to do any kind of touring whatsoever on a ski like that. Even a hut-to-hut, you know, you'd have a long day getting to the turns if you were to have to cover some ground on any of these types of skis. These are really for just having fun pointing downhill. All right, so that's quickly the skis. We'll talk about boots in a second. Over here, just so you know, these are an extension of skiing. We call them kind of sliding snowshoes, the Alte Hawk and the Marquette. You'll notice we've got a snowshoe on the very end. They kind of bridge the gap. We'll talk about these in a separate video. I just wanted to give you a quick glimpse as to the fact that there's another category out there for having fun in the snow. Now let's talk about boots real quick. Boots are a huge, important part of your day. You got to think, whatever ski you end up getting, you have a boot that's appropriate for that ski. Real quickly, I put the BC X2 in here. This is a pretty light-duty backcountry NNN boot. Really, it's only going to find itself on like the Lite-Terrain or the Eon. Pretty light duty, so it doesn't have a lot of ankle support or lateral support to turn the wider skis. Just enough for the narrower skis, however, so we put it in this category anyway. And then for beefier boots, we've got the Alpina 1550 men's and the Alpina 1550 EVE for women. This is a more rugged NNN BC boot. It's got, you know, a good ankle support, really warm and cozy, and it's happy on even up to the Epoch or the S-Bound 98. You could, I suppose, put it on the cross terrain, but beyond that, I would say you're looking at a 75mm type boot. The most support you're going to find in an NNN boot is the BC X10 by Rossi. Big old articulating cuff here, a lot of ankle support, a lot of lateral support, pretty stiff boot, zippered lace cover, meant to be warm, cozy, durable, and have a lot of power to really make some aggressive, or I should say some assertive turns using these slightly wider skis. You know, again, I'd keep with the NNN system. I would stick to mostly this end of the spectrum. Maybe dabble a little if you're really primarily on flat rolling terrain. But if you're looking to make turns with conviction, you got to go 75mm. But this will certainly power with using the Alpine turn or the plow turn, any of these skis when a hill comes along. But really great for touring. All right. Then we've got our 75mm, starting with the Alpina 1575, pretty light duty 75mm boot. With 75mm, your focus is on control downhill. You're going to give up a little bit of touring comfort and efficiency for the extra power you get on the downhill. This is a pretty light duty 75mm boot though, so you could certainly ski it on the lighter end of the spectrum. It's going to now transfer over to these wider skis, and I wouldn't put it on the super wides. Not enough power. The wider the skis get, the more aggressive terrain you're going to be on. You need a bigger boot, not big enough. So 75mm works great on this sort of end of the spectrum. This 1575 from Alpina. Then we get into our kind of our beefy 75mm backcountry boots. We've got two that are non-plastic, and then we got our plastic shells. We've got the Rossignol BC X6 right here. This kind of fits in the middle of the 1575 and this next model by Fischer. Pretty aggressive boot, lots of support there, and you're gonna now you're pushing more toward the turning end. You want to try some telly turns maybe. So you know, it's never overkill on the narrower skis, but really happy toward the middle of the spectrum again. And the Fischer BCX675 right here is got an even taller cuff. This has the most power of any of the boots that we offer that are non-plastic for 75mm. So now you could actually get into some of these wider skis with a binding that has a cable. You could get enough support to make some decent turns. But this is a really great boot for checking out the backcountry, making some turns here and there, and you know, skiing on some of these wider skis for that deep snow. But if you really want to make really beautiful turns with the least amount of effort, you got to go with a plastic shell boot. We'll start with a Scarpa T4. This is kind of the utilitarian option between this and the Garmont Excursion here. So it's a little bit heavier, it's a little bit stiffer. This will power really any of these skis. You know, when you're talking about the Charger BC, at that point you might actually want to consider like a telly boot, a full-on telly boot. But you could certainly do some, you know, make some turns with the T4. But the T4, happy on the Vector BC, super happy on the BC 125, and down to, I'd say, about the Annum. Once you get into this category, you're putting a lot of boot on these skis. You really don't need it because these skis can't handle the terrain that this boot can. So, you know, you could certainly do it though, but it's really more designed for the bigger skis. And then finally we have the Garmont Excursion. Quick note about the Garmont Excursion. First of all, it's available in a women's. Garmont was recently purchased the rights to build this boot by Scott. Scott's a big company. They make great stuff. The boot is not going to change except for the name. It's going to become the Scott Excursion. But the construction is going to be exactly the same. So these are the last of the Garmonts, unfortunately, but the boot isn't going anywhere. It's just going to be under a different name. This boot is really the finest backcountry plastic shell boot that we sell. It has actually a different durometer. The P-backs they use is a softer material in the bellows, so it has a softer flex. It's kind of hard to make it work with my hand, but you really notice it if you are stuck touring around, kicking and gliding. And also when you roll to the ball of your foot for a telly turn, you can just sort of feel. It has more of a leather boot feel, but it is a plastic boot, ton of support. So you know, you pick a plastic boot because you want the most downhill support possible. You're skiing a big wide ski in pretty aggressive terrain, and otherwise it's very, very warm. It's waterproof, and it can pack out. The liner is pretty thick, so it's going to fit your foot eventually really, really well. In this boot, you're going to slap on the bigger skis, and because it has that nice soft flex and it's a pretty light boot, you could certainly put it on the Eon or the Epoch and do more of a touring setup with a plastic boot. Don't think this is overkill or really, really heavy, awful, uncomfortable boot. This is a great, great boot. But if you're spending most of your day on a packed, you know, frozen lake for miles and miles, you don't need this boot. But if you know you're on a terrain like snowmobile trails where there are going to be some hills, you might want to dart off the trail. This will give you the best time possible. So it's really a matter of, you know, trying to decide what type of skiing you want to do most of the time, and then picking that package to suit your needs. If you want to do it all, buy 2, 3, 4 packages. We'd be happy to sell you those. So anyway, hopefully this helps you out, folks. Have fun out there skiing. My name is Ryan from ORS Cross Country Skis Direct.